However, Dod did have another attempt at working when he got a job alongside his brother Ian at Balmoral Glass. Again, pretty early on, Dod decided that he hated working there. So he found a broom, kicked the brush bit off, and attached a board to it on which he painted the words, "Stuff this shit," or words to that effect, which I'm not going to say. And then he proceeded to walk around the factory with his protest sign. He and Ian then decided they both had enough, so they walked out, got some cider, and went and got wasted at Unitaris Gardens instead. Although Dod never worked again in official capacity, over the years he undertook a huge amount of voluntary work for various charities. Dod just had a huge heart, and it was just in his very instinct to help others, wasn't it? He was really considerate and thoughtful too. When he first met his friend Simone, she was chatting about donkey charities, and so the very next day Dod turned up with a certificate for her. He'd sponsored a donkey on her behalf. How nice is that? And if he ever came home late, he'd swing in by his favourite bakery, the Byron Bakery, and buy bags and bags of rowies and fine pieces, which he would then go and hang on the door handles of his elderly neighbours. I mean, who does that? Well, Dod. He was just that kind of man, wasn't he? Then in 1985, Aberdeen band Toxic Effects was looking for a lead singer, and Dod got the gig. He really took to being a vocalist, and he was a great frontman with loads of stage presence. As Ian said, Dod was an amazing performer, and his sisters Sheila and Margaret went to see the band a few times, and very proudly told anybody that would listen, "That's my little brother on stage." Now with Dod up front, the band went from strength to strength. In 1987, the band recorded their first single at Pierhouse Studios in Edinburgh, after a recommendation from fellow punk rockers Oi Polloi. Now over the next few years, the band released a couple of split albums and undertook a tour of Europe. Now by this time, Dod had also taken up the pipes, and he often started gigs by playing pipes, and that went down a storm with the European crowd. And of course the band gigged a lot back in Scotland too, and on one occasion, after Dod had heard about an elderly lady who'd been mugged, he persuaded the band to play a charity gig, and afterwards he went round and knocked at the woman's door and handed her the entire proceedings from the gig. But that was just one more example of Dod's social conscience. He, as the family said, he was just forever doing things like that. Now Toxic Effects gathered quite a following, and their unique sound gained the respect of fellow musicians too. Punk band The Dead Kennedys rated Toxic Effect as the best ever Scottish band, which is quite some accolade. And it's widely acknowledged that Dod really played a huge part in the progression of the punk scene and music in general in Aberdeen. Dod's love of the pipes never left him either. You could often find him busking on Union Street or playing at weddings, and if it was ever your first foot at New Year, well, you better be prepared for a blast of the pipes in your living room. Now Dod lived on the Haddo estate for a number of years with Diane and his Alsatian Murphy. They lived a simple life there, and it was a very happy time for Dod. Now as you all no doubt know, Dod was a very, very sociable man who would happily chat away to anyone, and it wasn't unusual for him to have a cup of tea with Lord Haddo, and Dod was always supplying the biscuits, of course. However, for the last 20 years or so, Dod has made his home back in Heathery Fold with his cat called ACAB, which his sisters have told me stands for All Cats Are Beautiful. And Dod had some great neighbours. Izzy, her fellow cat owner, became a very good friend of Dod's. She would often have him over for food. In later years, Izzy would always know when Dod wasn't so well because ACAB would come through her cat flap to be fed. Izzy would then immediately go through to check on Dod. She really was a very good friend to him. Dod's other great friend and neighbour was Bob. He and Dod got on very well, and Bob said recently he'd always found Dod to be a very pleasant neighbour. And he also went on to say that when Mickey Mouse visited Aberdeen, he came home with a Dod Copeland watch. When Dod moved back to Northfield, he managed to reconnect with his old pal, Moon. The two became great friends once again, and Dod's family want to thank Moon and Dod's other great friend, Duffy, for the friendship that they extended to their brother. Andy, Duff and Hen were also very good pals of Dod's, and they helped him a lot. But in truth, as you know, Dod had lots of friends and acquaintances. He was just a thoroughly decent bloke. But he was really good company too. He had a great sense of humour. He'd always have a joke to tell you. Dod was such a well-known character around Northfield, although he was often heard long before he was seen. Dod loved to stroll about with his ghetto blaster on his shoulder, blasting out his music. And it wasn't just punk music that he played either. Dod had an eclectic taste and liked everything from the Bay City Rollers to Motown and everything in between. And it was the same in his back garden. In the last few years, Dod was quite content in his own company, sitting by the fire pit with some twinkly lights around him, playing his music. Now, Dod usually played his music very loud, but not one of his neighbours minded. In fact, someone wrote recently that they used to turn the telly down and open the window because Dod played such good music. And if you ever visited him, he'd always say, "Here's a song for you," and he'd play just the right track. He knew everybody's musical taste. Dod also had a lot of time for the neighbourhood kids. He'd always been good with kids, with plenty of experience with all his numerous nieces and nephews, of course. And there was one time he witnessed some kid bullying another kid, and he got them all together and had a bit of a heart-to-heart. And he was absolutely delighted when, sometime later, he saw them all outside, playing happily together. And I'm sure the kids were impressed with Dod's magic tricks too. He was known as Magic Dod to some. He could perform tricks such as lighting his wallet on fire when he paid for his groceries. And he was a real showman too, wasn't he? And he had just the right patter to accompany his performance. Now, Dod had always liked building and adapting things, and apparently his favourite tools for these were Gorilla Glue and duct tape. He liked to make things look unique. And Sheila said that whenever he visited, he just couldn't help but arrange stuff in her house, and by the time he left, the house looked like a bomb had hit it. And one time, Dod and his good friend Digby each bought themselves a laser pen, and of course, Dod immediately started to try and make his pen look different from Digby's. However, in doing so, his pen then didn't work, so he then spent the rest of the time trying to get Digby's pen off of him. Digby actually wanted to put the laser pen in with Dod today, but sadly that wasn't allowed. Then just 3 months ago, Dod became unwell and was eventually diagnosed with kidney failure and bone cancer, which sadly was quite advanced. Dod asked his doctor to be straight with him, and he was told that if he accepted treatment, he'd have 1.5 years, but if he didn't, he'd have 6 months. Now, for many years, Dod had endured many painful interventions in an attempt to deal with his Crohn's disease, so he decided just to refuse all treatment. Furthermore, he was adamant that he wouldn't spend his last days in hospital. In fact, just the week before he passed away, his pals took him over to the Bernavat, and he insisted on climbing a tree. Just recently, Dod's family offered to help him empty his flat in his garden, but seizing just one more opportunity to give the finger to authority, he refused the offer and instead insisted that they leave the job up to the council instead. And then, of course, when Dod finally did pass away, his family lit a bonfire and had a party in his back garden and blasted out all of his music, and I'm sure he would have approved. You know, sometimes life is very cruel, and sometimes our loved ones are taken from us far too soon. We grieve not only for what we've lost, but for what we shall never have again. We can't hide from the sadness of the loss of someone we love, but we can face that loss with courage and take comfort from the memories that we cherish and keep with us. We can choose to remember Dod with admiration and love, because you all love Dod. It was impossible not to. Every now and then, if we're very, very lucky, someone like Dod touches our lives. Someone who's a real charismatic character. Someone who's helpful and kind. Someone who's friendly and funny. Someone who makes you feel better just for having been in their company. And that was Dod. Let us listen to the piper now, and perhaps use this time just to think about Dod and what he meant to you. time to bid a sad but very fond farewell to Dod. Dod, it's time to say our goodbyes now, but first we have to say thank you. Thank you for your unending kindness and generosity to those you knew and those you never met. Thank you for your smile, your sense of fun, and the happiness that you wove into the lives of all of those around you. Thank you, Dod, for being you. This world is a far richer place for your presence amongst us. We say our goodbyes now, but know that your legacy is a family who loves you dearly and knows how much you love them. With great respect, we now bid you farewell, and with much love, we leave you in peace.